Some fights aren't won with fists, they're survived in silence. Arnold Schwarzenegger hadn't thrown a punch in years, not since he left the spotlight, trading red carpets for quiet mornings with his granddaughter. But one ordinary afternoon in a California supermarket, a scream echoed down aisle 7. And that was enough. Enough to test every scar he'd carried, every lesson forged in iron, and every promise he'd made to never stand by when wrong went unanswered. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. It started with a bump, not loud, not dramatic, just a careless shoulder, a hulking man turning the corner too fast and colliding with the girl like she didn't exist. Lily stumbled back, sneakers scraping the tile, one arm flailing, the other clutching a crinkled bag of cookies. She hit the floor with a soft thud, elbow first. The bag burst beside her, spilling frosted shards across the aisle like broken glass under fluorescent lights. She didn't cry, she blinked, tried to understand what had just happened. She was 12, freckles across her nose, ponytail looped high in a purple scrunchie, hoodie too big, jeans with star patches at the knees. Her hands trembled, not from pain, but from something colder. The man loomed over her, maybe late 30s, all swollen muscle and too tight sleeves. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning her like a problem he didn't have time for. "You kids don't watch where you're going," he barked. His voice didn't rise, but it cut sharp, annoyed, final. Lily sat up slowly, holding her elbow. People turned, looked, then turned back. No one moved, no one spoke. The man scoffed and stepped closer. "Maybe you need a lesson," he muttered. Then came the slap. A fast, open-handed crack across her cheek. It echoed, not just through the aisle, but through the silence. Lily's head snapped sideways, her eyes wide, lips parted in disbelief. The color rushed to her face, a burning red against pale skin. She didn't fall this time, she just froze. She brought a hand to her cheek, touched it like she wasn't sure it was hers. Around her, shopping carts paused mid-roll. A kid near the cereal shelf dropped a box. A woman near the fruit section gasped, then quickly looked away. And still, no one stepped in. The man flexed his fingers like it meant nothing, like it wasn't the first time. Like she was just noise in his day. Lily stared at the floor, her hands curled in her lap. Her voice stayed buried somewhere inside her chest. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. And that was when it happened, not a shout. Not a fight, just a shift in the air, like something had turned, like the pressure in the room changed. The man's smirk twitched. He turned, sensing something behind him, not footsteps, not breath, just presence. At the far end of the aisle, a figure stepped into view, not fast, not menacing, just steady, denim shirt, solid frame, one arm carrying a gallon of milk, the other relaxed by his side. His face was unreadable, his eyes locked on the girl. And suddenly the world went quieter than before. No one recognized him, not yet, but they felt it, that weight, that stillness, the kind that made your chest tighten. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. Because sometimes, justice doesn't start with noise. It starts with silence that makes everything else feel too loud. The man turned fully now, square shoulders shifting as he looked down the aisle. What he saw wasn't what he expected. No badge, no angry shopper, just an older man, maybe 70. Broad frame, sleeves rolled up, lines around his eyes deep like they'd been carved there by time and war and weight. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't posturing. He was just walking, one step at a time, like he had all the time in the world and nothing to prove. A gallon of milk dangled from his left hand. His right stayed loose at his side. The lights overhead seemed softer when they passed above him, like even the fixtures knew not to buzz too loud. He reached Lily's cart without a word. The man in front of her frowned, confused, then smirked. "You her grandpa or something?" he said, trying to sound tough, but there was a catch in his voice he didn't expect. The older man didn't answer. He set the milk gently into the cart. Then slowly, methodically, he removed his jacket. Worn denim, faded in the shoulders, the cuffs softened by years of real work. He folded it once, then again, placed it across the handle of the shopping cart like it mattered. Like preparation meant something. Only then did he look up. His voice came low, thick with age and authority. "Apologize to my granddaughter. That was it, not a shout, not a demand, just expectation, like gravity. The man scoffed, seriously. He said, "You think you can just walk in here, play tough guy, and I'm supposed to back down?" He took a step closer, testing him. "What for?" "Because she tripped over herself and touched my arm." "Get real, Gramps." Still nothing changed in the old man's face. No twitch, no threat, just the same steady stare. The kind of stare that made you remember your father's silence before a beating. A few feet away, near the dairy coolers, a store employee had stopped moving. He was young, probably college age, name tag tilted. His hand hovered above a box of yogurt. His eyes were locked on the man by the cart. His mouth opened a little, then he whispered, almost too soft to hear, That's Arnold, the Arnold." Heads turned. Whispers moved like smoke. Not everyone recognized him, but those who did, they froze, not because of the movies, not because of the headlines, but because in this moment, he wasn't a celebrity, he was a force. The man in front of Lily didn't hear the whispers, or maybe he didn't care, he just laughed. "I get it now," he said. "Grandpa's got a hero complex. You think this is a movie, huh? You gonna lecture me, teach me a lesson?" He puffed his chest, rolled his neck. "Go ahead, old man, take your best shot." Arnold didn't move, didn't blink, didn't rise to the bait. His voice came again like stone dragged across the ground. "Apologize to my granddaughter, 3 times now, same tone, same weight." And suddenly the laughter stopped, the smirk faded. Because somewhere deep in the back of the man's lizard brain, a signal went off. This wasn't noise, this was warning, a warning wrapped in calm, wrapped in patience, wrapped in something bigger than fists. And the aisle went quiet again, not from fear. From something deeper, respect, or the beginning of it, the kind that comes right before the fall. It was a few weeks earlier, maybe more. The sky had just turned gold near the edge of the lake, and the air smelled like pine and old stone. Arnold walked slowly beside Lily on the narrow path that circled the water. He let her set the pace. She never rushed. Her hands were tucked behind her back like she was pretending to be someone older, someone who thought a lot before they spoke, which was exactly what she was doing. "Grandpa," she said, her voice small but clear, "have you ever been scared?" Arnold didn't answer right away. He kept walking, his boots crunching softly against gravel. The lake shimmered. Wind nudged ripples across the surface. He looked ahead, not at her, not at the water, just forward, as if the answer was out there waiting for him. "Once," he said, maybe more than once, but one time changed everything. She glanced up, curious, but didn't push. He appreciated that. "Back when I was 19, he said, "I was driving a tank for the Austrian army. Big thing, loud, steel everywhere. I wasn't used to it. Thought I was better than the rules. We were supposed to hold position. I moved it anyway, tried to be efficient, tried to show off." He paused there, jaw tight. Tank slid off the road, down into a ditch. No one got hurt, but it could have been worse, much worse. Lily's eyes widened just a little. "What happened?" she asked. "I sat in front of my commander," Arnold said. "He was older, tougher, not a man you lied to. He asked why I moved. I could have said a lot of things, bad instructions, miscommunication, even blamed the terrain, but I didn't. I said it was me, just me." He stopped walking. The wind had died. Even the trees felt still. "And that moment," he said, "is when I realized something. Strength isn't lifting weights. It's carrying the truth, even when it crushes your pride." Lily looked down at the ground, absorbing it. Then she said softly, "What if you're right, and everyone says you're wrong?" Arnold smiled, but just a little, not with amusement, but with memory. "Then you stand alone," he said. "Because that's what a man does." She didn't say anything at first. Then she nodded, not because she understood completely, but because she believed him. They kept walking, no more questions for a while. Just 2 shadows stretching beside each other in the dying light. And now, in the cold silence of the supermarket aisle, that moment came back to her, not with words, with weight, with the way Arnold stood, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. That same posture, that same truth. He wasn't acting brave. He was being who he had always promised her he would be, a man who never stepped back when it was right to stand still. And somewhere inside that little girl, through the sting on her cheek and the ringing in her ears, something clicked. She didn't need to be afraid, because the world had just changed, not loudly, quietly, one slow breath at a time. The aisle hadn't moved, not a breath, not a word. Lily still sat on the cold tile, her hands pressed against her lap, fingers curled tightly together. Her cheek was red, her eyes glassy but dry. She wasn't crying, she was watching. Arnold stood beside her now, tall, still, the weight of the world held in his posture, not his fists. The man in front of them shifted his stance, trying to hold onto the last pieces of his swagger. He chuckled, but it came out nervous, not sharp. "What's the matter, old man?" he said, voice louder now, like volume could fill the growing silence. "You think standing there, folding your little jacket, makes you some kind of threat?" Arnold said nothing. He didn't even blink. The man took a step closer. "Say something," he pushed, "or what? You gonna lecture me again? Scold me? Spank me in front of the store like I'm your kid?" Arnold's voice came low, not angry. Not shaken, just final, last chance. "Apologize." The man laughed again, this time too loud, too forced. He gestured to the shoppers frozen at the ends of the aisle. "You all seeing this? This dude thinks he's in a movie. Mr. Terminator over here wants me to say sorry because some brat couldn't watch where she was going." Still no change in Arnold's face. No shift. No warning, just that same presence. Solid, centered. The kind of calm that only makes sense when you've seen real chaos. The thug's grin twitched. "You serious right now? You gonna hit me? That it? Come on, Gramps, make a move, do something." Behind the cereal shelf, a second figure moved. Not loud, not fast, just deliberate. He was younger, leaner, a shaved head catching the flicker of overhead lights. He wore a faded black jacket and walked like someone who'd done bad things and never paid the price for them. In his right hand, low and tucked against his thigh, was a short iron pipe, thin enough to swing fast, heavy enough to hurt. He was circling around the other side of the aisle. Slow, quiet, eyes locked on Arnold's back. The first man didn't notice. Too busy posturing, too busy talking. The shoppers did, though. A woman near the bread display gasped but didn't speak. A kid near the drinks section lowered his phone slowly. Something was shifting, building. The kind of pressure that lives right before a storm. The kind that makes the air taste different. Arnold's eyes never left the man in front of him. His voice came one last time. "Apologize to my granddaughter." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be, because the aisle already knew what was coming. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of vision, the second man raised the pipe and took one step closer. The sound came before the pain, a sharp metallic clang that cracked through the aisle like a gunshot. The iron pipe struck high, just beneath the base of Arnold's skull, glancing down across his neck and shoulder. His body jerked forward from the force, legs folding underneath him, one knee crashing to the tile with a hollow thud. Milk sloshed in the cart beside him. A gasp rippled down the aisle like falling dominoes. Lily's breath caught. She reached forward, fingers trembling, but didn't touch him. Blood ran in a thin red line down the back of his neck, soaking into his collar. The man with the pipe stood behind him now, smirking. The other one stepped back, blinking in surprise, then breaking into a satisfied grin. "Well, damn," he muttered. "That was easier than I thought." Arnold didn't speak, didn't shout. He braced one hand on the floor, wide fingers spreading over linoleum tile like they were finding the earth itself. His other arm trembled as he pushed upward, breath slow and ragged, shoulder rolling beneath the pain. He didn't rise fast. He rose like a machine with old gears, like every movement had been earned over decades. First one knee, then the other. Then he was upright, not tall, not proud, just standing. The pipe man's grin faded an inch. The first man stepped closer, arms wide. "You don't know when to quit, do you, old man?" Arnold turned toward them, blood trailing down the side of his face, eyes darker than before. Slower now, but still steady, still here. The silence returned, that same silence. The kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that rewrites rooms. One of the customers whispered something, couldn't make it out, but it sounded like awe, like disbelief. Arnold shifted his weight, felt the sting in his right shoulder, the throb where the bone had taken the brunt. He didn't show it. Only blinked once slow. Somewhere deep inside, the pain was real, but pain wasn't new. Pain had a name. Pain had history, and it always came with a choice: fall or get up. A voice echoed from decades back, tucked inside the walls of a cold Austrian farmhouse. His father's voice, harsh but honest. Falling doesn't mean failure, staying down does. Arnold took a breath. It hurt, but it filled his chest. And that was enough. The man with the pipe stepped forward again, swinging it in lazy arcs like a toy. "You've got no idea who you're messing with," he said. Arnold didn't answer. He didn't need to. He'd already made his choice. He was going to stand, and if they wanted him down, they'd have to break more than just his bones. 3 men, one standing in front, arms twitching, muscles tight, one flanking left, still gripping the iron pipe. And the third, quiet until now, stepping in from the right, smaller build, tighter stance, the kind that said he knew how to hit and where. They didn't rush all at once. Predators don't do that. They test, probe, wait for weakness. Arnold rolled his shoulder once, slow, blood still dripping from his neck. His right leg ached. His vision narrowed just slightly, but his stance, balanced. Weight even, eyes forward. The first man lunged, big, angry, overconfident. His fist swung wide, meant to scare more than strike, but Arnold didn't back away. He stepped inside it. The punch flew past his ear, and in one fluid motion, Arnold brought his elbow up. It connected hard with the man's shoulder, not to break it, but to end the fight. The joint popped. The man screamed, staggered sideways, arm dangling useless. Arnold didn't chase him, just turned. Pipe man moved next, faster, bolder. He grunted and swung the metal in a tight arc at Arnold's ribs. Arnold shifted, let it pass inches from his torso, then reached up and grabbed the man's wrist. One twist, sharp, controlled. The pipe clanged to the floor. A second twist sent the man to one knee. Arnold didn't follow through. He released. Stepped back, gave the man a choice, walk away. He didn't take it. The third man approached, calm, focused. This one was different. He moved with intent, fists high, chin tucked, the stance of someone trained, maybe boxing, maybe more. He circled. Arnold adjusted his footing, breathing shallow now, pain simmering just beneath the surface. The fighter feinted left, then launched a jab at Arnold's chest. Arnold blocked, but the next strike came faster, a hook toward the ribs. It landed, hard, the breath hitched in Arnold's throat. He stepped back, steady but slower. The crowd behind the shelves had grown. No one spoke. No one moved. Phones were forgotten. This wasn't a video anymore. It was something else. The trained man pressed again. Another jab. A low kick. Arnold parried the hand, took the kick on the thigh. He didn't wince, but his knee buckled slightly. He shifted again, drawing a line between himself and the shelves. The other 2 men were regrouping, shaking out pain, circling again. And still, Arnold didn't speak, didn't curse, didn't roar. He moved with weight, with purpose, with an exhaustion he refused to show. The trained man came again, this time with a spinning strike, fast and low. Arnold ducked. The fist brushed his shoulder. He stepped in close, pressed his forearm against the man's chest, and used the man's own momentum to shove him backward. Not brutal, just efficient. The move bought him seconds, but seconds were enough. Pipe man grabbed the weapon again. Arnold turned just in time. The pipe whistled toward his head. He ducked, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted low. The same motion, same force. This time he didn't let go. He guided the man into the shelves, body thudding against the canned goods, pipe clattering across the tile again. The first man, injured arm hanging, charged out of pride. Arnold met him halfway, a clean sidestep. One open palm strike to the man's chest sent him backward, crashing into a pyramid of paper towels. Then silence, for a breath, until the trained one returned, this time with no flourish. Just a single hard kick square into Arnold's side. The impact was brutal, deep. Arnold stumbled, boots sliding an inch. He caught himself on the shelf, eyes narrowing, hand at his ribs. The pain was sharp. His face tightened. Not in rage, not in fear, just disappointment, not for himself, for them, for what they chose to be. He looked at the man and shook his head once. Quiet, almost like mourning. There were other ways, he whispered, but you chose this one. And the aisle, once again, forgot how to breathe. They came together this time. No more circling, no more testing, just rage, pride, desperation. The injured one led, face red, good arm raised, moving like a man who'd already lost but didn't know how to stop. The pipe man followed, blood on his lip, gripped tight around the handle like it was the only thing keeping him brave. The trained fighter flanked right, silent, eyes sharp, pace cold and calculated. Arnold didn't run, didn't flinch. He stood where he was, body squared, breath even, boots planted like roots in concrete. The first strike came wild, a hook from the injured man. Arnold didn't dodge. He absorbed it, shoulder rolling with the blow, redirecting it with a slight turn of his torso. The pain was real, but so was the control. He reached across and tapped the man's elbow mid-swing, spinning him off balance. Not hard. Just enough. The man stumbled sideways, crashing into a shelf of boxed pasta. The pipe swung high. Arnold ducked low, let it pass just inches above his head. Then he stepped in, chest to chest, arms close. He didn't punch. He grabbed the man's wrist with one hand, shoulder with the other, and drove his weight downward. The pipe dropped again. This time, Arnold kicked it away, down the aisle, out of reach. A boot slid across tile. The trained man attacked, 2 quick jabs to the ribs, then a knee. Arnold blocked one, took the second. The knee landed. His breath hitched, but he stayed upright, stayed grounded. The fighter went for a sweep. Arnold shifted weight to his back leg, let the foot pass, and caught the man's momentum with a forearm across the chest. One shove sent him off course, crashing into the side of a frozen food door. Then it stopped. Not the movement. Not the noise, but the intent. Because now all 3 men were moving slower, not physically, but mentally. They were starting to realize something terrible. This man in front of them, this old man with blood on his collar and stiffness in his legs, he wasn't standing out of habit. He was standing out of choice. And he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to end it without ruining anyone. Arnold turned toward the injured man, who was breathing hard, sweat pooling on his brow. "You've had enough," Arnold said, voice calm. The man hesitated, then dropped to one knee. "Done." The pipe man followed, hands open. "Done." The trained one lingered a second longer, chest rising, then he stepped back. "Done." And Arnold just nodded. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't shout. He stood, still, steady, and somehow that broke them more than any punch ever could, because there's something more powerful than force, more lasting than fear, it's resolve. It's a man who won't fall, not because he can't, but because he won't let himself. Not yet, not here, not in front of the girl who still sat at the end of the aisle, watching him like the world was rewriting itself in real time. And in that moment, everyone knew he hadn't beaten them with fists. He'd beaten them with the one thing they never expected: dignity. The aisle was wreckage. Cans rolled across the floor, a shelf leaned sideways, the cart lay on its side with one wheel still spinning. 3 men sat or knelt among the mess, breathing heavy, eyes down. No one clapped, no one cheered. But no one looked away either. Arnold stood at the center, hand braced against a freezer door, chest rising slow and steady. Blood traced a line from his hairline down his neck, drying into the collar of his shirt. His legs trembled but held, not because they wanted to, because they were told to. He turned slowly, eyes searching down the aisle. Lily was still there, still small, still sitting behind the cart, knees pulled close, hands gripping the edge. Her cheeks were red, her eyes full, but not from fear, from something deeper, something heavier. She didn't run to him, she didn't need to. Arnold took one step, then another, legs stiff, right hand cradling his ribs, each movement deliberate. Earned as he reached her, Lily stood, no words, no questions. She just wrapped her arms around him, careful but firm. He winced, then rested his hand gently against her back. Together they turned. The crowd parted in silence. A man near the bread aisle bent down and picked up the crushed package of cookies she had dropped earlier. He didn't say anything, just walked forward and placed it carefully in their cart, then stepped back. The cashier, young, maybe 20, watched them pass. Her hand still hovered near her scanner, frozen mid-swipe. Her voice came out barely above a breath. "My kid," she said, "I'll teach him to defend himself, but I'll teach him to be like that." The rest of the store watched, not out of curiosity now, out of something else, something more quiet, more rare: respect. Arnold didn't acknowledge the whispers, didn't look back at the mess. He just walked, past the overturned display, past the workers who couldn't speak, past the parents who held their children closer. As they neared the doors, the automatic glass slid open with a soft hiss. Sunlight spilled in across the tile. Arnold stepped through first. Lily followed, still holding his hand. The doors closed behind them, And for a long moment, the silence inside remained, not empty, not fearful, but full, changed. The kind of silence left behind by a man who never asked for recognition. Because he didn't need a name to be remembered, just the courage to stand when no one else would. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.